Welcome. We are going to explore building forensic graphics and summary exhibits. This is really important because at the end of the day, people are visual learners, and it's helpful to know, especially if it's a complex case, what happened and how. So, visual impact can be very powerful. First of all, it breaks up what could be boring or monotonous testimony. It's very important in complex cases. It also is a way to convey information very succinctly. It also can be useful in helping demonstrate a pattern of behavior, especially if it's over time. And again, people are visual learners, so it's really helpful to be able to do this. So let's define what a summary exhibit is. My definition is it's a visual representation of complex information that's used to help quickly and accurately convey the essential details for a decision maker. So let's think about the audience here. Who are you talking to? Who are the people that are going to be looking at this evidence? Are they the jury? Are they lawyers? Are they judges? Will there be, so that's in a trial setting, but in a business setting or in a administrative setting, it could be any number of other people. What experience do they have with the issue, right? The more experience they have, obviously, the less explanation they need. But then again, we don't want to assume that either. It's important to understand that different interpretations and perspectives can come through. So we want to make sure that it is accurate and that any misinterpretations don't occur. So we want to make sure that that's conveyed. And we also need to understand how complex is the information. If it's simply a list of bank records and transactions, that's one thing. If it's a bunch of overseas shell companies, trusts, LLCs, things like that, that's going to be very different, and we want to consider that. The bottom line is that charts, graphs, and summaries need to be very clean, clear, and organized in order to be the most helpful. Here, we want to be able to reduce complexity. We want to bring clarity to the situation. And we want to aggregate facts, especially if they're facts from different pieces of the puzzle, if you will. And that includes combining different data sources. We want to both show and tell, right? It's a story that we're trying to convey. And we also need to be able to illustrate processes because sometimes the details get lost and we have to help people understand what the bigger picture was and what the process at issue was. So recently, law professors and jurists have changed their tune. It used to be, say, briefs or other court filings never included any visual of any kind. Well, that has changed. It's really flipped on its head. I like this because the law professor has looked into this and say, remember that visuals convey concepts that text just can't or can't do as well. It's also very easy to understand it and interpret it, especially when you're dealing with complex issues. And there's a real persuasive force, right? There's impact to this. You really understand, again, the entirety of what's going on, who's doing what, and where things are going. It is absolutely critical that if you're working on these, you have to check, recheck, check again, and really have somebody who is not engaged in the situation or the case to really proofread, verify the data, understand what's going on, look at it from a perspective that's totally blank. So let's take an example and let's think about it in terms of the presentation and how we go visually. So first we want a chart that is clear and clean. We really want to be able to follow it without any explanation. And this is a good example. So this is from a civil case, and basically what it's breaking everything down, right? And you may not know anything about the case, but at least you can see and follow where things go and how they got to the grand total, if you will. It's free from distortion, right? All of the information that's on this can be attributed back to some other underlying exhibit, and that's really the key here is being able to show, where you got your numbers. And here, the strategic use of color, I think, is really helpful. So first of all, they shade one or two parts of it, and then they use red to help highlight the grand total of what was billed, and there's a 10% holdback, but also then the grand total of reductions. So again, you kind of see this is a very simple example, but essentially you're able to follow this even though you have absolutely no understanding of what the case is. So headings can be really important, but they can also get us into trouble. We don't want them to be inflammatory or distortive, right? We don't want them to be prejudiced. So, for example, if you say, "Well, this column is dirty money," well, that's kind of jumping to a conclusion, right? That might be an opinion, where we could use allegedly tainted funds as a different header. That's a little bit more neutral, conveys that there's not finality to the issue. We want to avoid that anything that's going to kind of detract from this, right? We really just want facts. And we want to be able to make it as easy as possible, right? If you're think about a juror who's sitting there who has no idea what's going on and has been listening to somebody drone on about commodities futures, and you have no clue what's happening, a visual will be very powerful, right? It really kind of helps to put things into context. Now, one common objection that I see is that the exhibits don't contain exculpatory data. So I just want to put that out there. Again, something to think about in terms of what you may encounter in these situations. So this is a good example, and we want to think about lines and space, right? So here you see clean lines, right? It's a very, understood, where the money went, how much went there, right? There's no overlap. There's no real clutter. Um, Now here they used a color coding system. So all of the accounts are in the yellows, and then the final um, uh, part here for the purchase um, of, I believe, a residence is in this orange box. So again, we have really clear understanding of what happened for the purchase of this particular residence. Now, we want to think about how consistent we are in creating these. If we put a legend that you'll see. Um, but the one thing I do want to point out is the shading and the color really needs to be very careful, because you just don't know how these are going to necessarily end up, and so you just need to be cautious about that. So let's go through some examples here. So this is a great um, analysis here of cash deposited, and it breaks it down into months and then what financial institutions. So you can really see basically over a year period how much was deposited into each different accounts. So it's 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015. So a 4-year period, right? Very succinct. Now, my only suggestion for this one would be to use the gridline print, which is an option in Microsoft Excel and any other spreadsheet software, but here we'll show you next. So here, if you go to page layout and you notice that there are grid lines and headings. Grid lines, we want to make sure that print grid lines is accessible. We can also do the print titles if it goes multiple pages. But again, these are just easy ways to make it very clear, clean, and understandable. So let's go through some of the common types of summary exhibits, and the rest of this video will kind of just walk through a few of these. But as you can see, they can be financial, they can be timelines, they can show relationships, communication, different locations, and even photos, right, can technically be summary exhibits as well. So be creative, right? Think about what type of information you have and how you can create this. So let's walk through a few of these. So this one is an example of cash deposit by year. And as you can see, it starts very small in 1 year, kind of continues, and then just grows exponentially the last 2 years, right? So you can really see, and it adds it up, makes it very simple. I like these boxes because you can really track what's happening. And then, of course, they have the specific dates as well. If you have tax information, this is also an excellent way to present that. So here is a bar chart that shows different types of income that was received that was not reported on, I believe this is a federal tax return. I worked a lot on shell companies, and this is actually from the Enron case, if you remember that from many years ago. But this is a transaction summary that shows relationships, so general partnerships, limited partnerships, and then different flows of funds to different individuals, and then, of course, the associations with those. For example, I believe Mr. Copper was an Enron employee as well. So, for example, you really can see where all this money left and where it went to. This is a chart that I actually created for an article that I wrote in Fraud Magazine that describes a bribery scheme between a government contract manager, IT professional named Roushie Conrad, and a gentleman named James Bedford, who was a subcontractor. And again, this kind of shows both the relationships of the individuals, the companies, and then what happened, what the scheme was. So, for example, in this one, the company Team America sent invoices to for the chicken place, Express, the restaurant, for support services that actually didn't occur. And then Team America paid the bribes, $208,000 for those. And then Team America also paid contractors for work that was done at Conrad's personal residence. So those are it's an uh, indirect payment, but a bribe nonetheless. Corporate entities and other organizational charts are really helpful, kind of to know who's who, especially if there was a lot of change. This is from the board of directors of WorldCom and their special investigative committee that talked about kind of who was responsible for different types of issues. Again, a lot of these are financial and accounting, and being able to kind of understand who is who. And so that's really helpful. No, it doesn't have to be a corporate entity. It can be a small business. It can be a nonprofit organization. It can be a government agency, all sorts of things. Here is an example of a checking account summary where I broke out the information by the amount of money that came in, so that would be income, and the amount of money that went out, so those are expenses down here, and then for a period of time, and then it come to a grand total. So here was able to kind of understand how much money actually went out and what was happening. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. So first of all, this includes notes. So these notes could be very helpful in understanding kind of some of the details behind a few things. And then I also put the legend. So this was, I put my date, or it was me who analyzed this, the date, and then this is the case information. So again, just helpful to understand who prepared this, what they were using it for, and when it happened. If you're involved in a case that involves a loss calculation, you can do that. This is an example, again, of restitution that is owed for purchases of different properties and investments, things like that. So as you can see, again, it's broken down so you can understand kind of how they got to it, who is involved, who the victim is, what the location is, etc. This is a neat chart. I call it the kind of sources and uses of funds. So, for example, in this is a publicly traded company where they received $631 million in fundraising through some form of investment, and then that went into the bank account, and then went into the company, and then from there was parsed out into others as well. So again, you can just follow it and see right where money went and who it went to. I love timelines and calendars and chronologies because I think it shows a lot of really useful information. And sometimes, from an investigative perspective, it can really be helpful in putting everything together, showing those patterns in the behavior, right? The time after time after time shows that is not accidental, right? There is an intent there, and you can kind of see and follow that. Um, but it also kind of shows what happened, when it happened, and who was involved. And again, in a case where there's lots of people, that can be very challenging. So we want to be able to simplify that. Here we have a calendar, a chronology of a case. And while there are different color schemes and a legend that's probably not included, you can still follow everything relatively easily and see what happened, whether it was within a relatively short period of time or over a longer period of time. Here is a chart showing the proceeds from an insurance fraud scheme that were laundered through multiple bank accounts. Again, you can see how the first check came through from the insurance company. and then there were partial deposits into several accounts. They were ultimately transferred into others, and then finally into the last one. So again, you can kind of see, easy to follow each stage step by step. Here we have an example of a summary chart that basically shows an overview of the scheme. So this is a case involving insurance fraud, and as you can see, there are different actors, and so such as patients, um, clinics, and then interestingly enough, within those clinics, you have the people that control the clinic, and then the doctors and the straw owners who are making money off of the scheme. And again, the insurance companies who are being billed for treatment and are making payments. So, of course, you have injury lawyers as well. Here, it's basically designed to illustrate kind of how things go across the entire scheme. The intended loss and then the actual loss. Those are two different numbers because they represent two separate pieces of information. So again, just it's a good overview, kind of helps put things into context for the people who need to make the decisions. Now we have an overview of a illegal gaming uh, scheme here. And again, we have slot machines that are in a bar. The cash from those slot machines, 50% goes to a company called Nix, 50% goes to the bar, and then the bar is paid, the bar pays for their rent in cash to this Norino Properties, which then uses it to make additional real estate purchases. Here's the issue, though. Nick's Amusements and Norino Properties are actually owned by the same individual, and in some cases actually owns the bar as well. So some of the money is siphoned off and skimmed. Some of it is made in cash deposits to pay for the otherwise legitimate business expenses and salaries. But as you can see, everything goes through Norino Properties. Again, illustrating the complexity of corporate ownership and movement of funds. So I hope this has been an interesting and enlightening video for you, and really understanding the importance of these visual tools to tell the story. They have to be anchored in fact. You need to be able to know what the details are. You want to be able to point to the admissible evidence that they come from, uh, because they show both the big picture and the key details. They need to be clean, clear, and self-explanatory, not overloaded with minutia. So hopefully that's been helpful. Feel free to leave any comments, and if you have any questions, appreciate it. Thanks.